Good evening, and welcome back to Haunted Tales. Tonight, we're traveling off the map to a town that time forgot, hidden deep in the back roads of America. A place where the streetlights flicker even though the power's been out for years. Where mail still arrives for people who died decades ago, and where every stranger seems to know your name before you speak. This episode uncovers 10 of the most chilling true stories from small towns across the country. Places so quiet, so ordinary that their darkness often goes unnoticed. But behind their dusty main streets and shuttered diners lie police files, eyewitness accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell a far more sinister truth. Some believe these towns are cursed. Others swear they're alive, feeding on whoever dares to pass through. And if you ever find yourself driving late at night and see a town that shouldn't be there, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look back. For the safety and privacy of those involved, some names and locations have been changed, but the fear is very real. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments from where are you watching and what time it is. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Haunted Tales and turn on notifications, because some roads lead to places that were never meant to be found. And in these small town roads, the shadows follow you home. The town of Duskford isn't on most maps anymore. You'll find it if you know where to look. Tucked deep in the Pennsylvania hills, about 40 miles from the nearest major highway. Locals say the town died the same night the bus went over the bridge. That was in 1963, during a torrential downpour that washed half the mountain road into the river below. 21 children, a driver, and a teacher, all gone in seconds. For years, the townspeople rebuilt the bridge, named it in memory of the lost students, and then quietly stopped talking about it. But truckers who pass through on night routes tell a different story. They call it Black Hollow Road, a two-lane artery winding through mist and silence, where the rain never quite dries from the asphalt. Most of them speak in hushed tones about what they've seen. A woman on the roadside, drenched, shivering, her pale face hidden behind strands of wet hair. She waves them down, pleading for a ride, and when they stop, that's when the real horror begins. One account comes from a driver named Harold Knox, a long-haul trucker who'd been hauling timber out of Duskford in late November of 1989. He remembers the fog rolling so thick it swallowed his high beams, the kind of fog that eats sound and makes your thoughts echo. It was close to 2:30 in the morning when he saw her, standing just beyond the guardrail, wearing what looked like a torn coat over a white dress. He slowed, thinking maybe she'd hitched a ride from one of the locals and got stranded. As he pulled over, his headlights caught her face. She was crying. Not the loud, desperate kind of crying, but soft, broken sobs, the kind that sound like someone trying not to remember. Harold rolled down his window and asked if she needed help. She didn't answer, just opened the passenger door and climbed in. Her clothes were soaked through, dripping onto the rubber matting, and the air inside the cab went instantly cold. Harold noticed her hands, small, trembling, with dirt under the fingernails like she'd been clawing through the ground. She whispered, barely audible, "Please, take me home." He nodded and started driving. The map showed a few farmhouses a few miles north, so he figured that's where she meant. But the longer they drove, the quieter it got. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade under the sound of distant rain. After a few minutes, Harold glanced over. She was staring out the window, at nothing. When he asked where she lived, she said one word: the bridge. At first he thought she meant they had to cross it. But when they reached the Black Hollow Bridge, she leaned forward, eyes wide, as if seeing something terrible. Then she smiled, a faint, childlike smile, and said, "They're waiting." Harold hit the brakes. The truck came to a screeching halt, headlights reflecting off the soaked guardrails. He looked at her again, and she was gone. The passenger seat was empty, still wet from her clothes, but she'd vanished in silence. The door never opened. Panicking, he jumped out, scanning the road, shouting into the fog. No footprints, no movement. Just the distant sound of running water below the bridge. When he leaned over the edge, he swore he saw something glint beneath the surface, like the reflection of a lantern swaying under the water. Then faintly he heard it, the sound of crying. He left the area that night and never returned to Duskford. 3 days later, when he stopped at a diner in Elk County, he told the story to another driver. The man went pale. He'd heard the same thing, except his encounter had been 2 years earlier, and he said he found small handprints on the inside of his windshield the next morning. Tiny wet handprints, as if a child had been sitting there, pressing against the glass. When local authorities checked Harold's dash cam, one of those old black and white models truckers used for insurance, the footage showed something strange. At timestamps 02:34, a figure appeared in the headlights, a woman, and as the truck stopped, several smaller shapes flickered behind her, like silhouettes of children lined up along the guardrail. But when the fog rolled in, the feed went static. Locals in Duskford don't like talking about Black Hollow Road. The town's only mechanic says sometimes, on clear nights, you can still hear the faint sound of wheels squealing and glass breaking, even though the new bridge was rebuilt decades ago. And every year, near the anniversary of the crash, flowers appear by the roadside, tied with ribbons that look decades old. No one knows who leaves them. The strangest part? Police dispatchers still receive calls from the old emergency line at the bridge, from a number that hasn't been active since 1963. When they play back the recording, all they hear is rain. And a woman's voice saying, "Please take me home." For most people, the story of Black Hollow Road is just another campfire tale, something to scare passing truckers or keep teenagers from drinking near the bridge. But if you talk to anyone who's lived in Duskford long enough, you'll realize something's wrong with that stretch of road, something that doesn't age. Take Margaret Lewin, for example. She was only 12 years old when the bus went off the bridge. She's 80 now, and though she moved away years ago, her daughter said she still wakes up some nights screaming, saying she can hear the river breathing. Margaret doesn't talk about the crash, but once in an interview from 2007, she said something that stuck with local historian Alan Pritchard. "They never found all the bodies," she whispered. "Not all the children. Some were missing when they pulled the bus out. We thought the current carried them off, but the river doesn't flow that way." The current, according to the rescue reports, moved north that night, away from where the bus had sunk. Yet the recovery teams found shoes, books, and pieces of the wreckage scattered south, near the area that later became known as the Hollow. Locals say the Hollow changes after midnight, when the fog rises from the creek. It rolls across the road like slow-moving smoke. People who've walked it say you can't hear your own footsteps, only the faint tapping of water dripping from unseen branches. Cell phones lose signal, compasses spin. It's as if the Hollow rejects direction, bending distance in ways that make no sense. Deputy Evan Dorr, who served in Duskford from 1991 to 2003, once told a reporter about a night he responded to a call out there. It was mid-January, snow falling so heavily it blurred the line between sky and ground. The call came from a man claiming there'd been an accident, a car off the bridge, people trapped inside. Dispatch logged the coordinates, and Dorr drove straight out. But when he arrived, there was no crash, no car, just a woman standing near the bridge rail, soaked and barefoot. He described her as white as candle wax, her clothes torn, her eyes reflecting the cruiser's lights like glass. When he stepped out of his vehicle and called to her, she turned slowly, tilted her head and said, "They're waiting for you too." Then she stepped backward and fell straight through the guardrail. Dorr ran to the edge, shining his flashlight down the embankment. There was no splash, no sign she'd fallen. When backup arrived 20 minutes later, they found the guardrail perfectly intact. No damage, no footprints. Dorr resigned 2 weeks later and left Pennsylvania for good. His resignation letter simply said, "I can't drive that road anymore." In 2014, a research team from a local college's folklore department visited Duskford to document the legend. They spent 3 nights recording audio near the bridge, using digital recorders and electromagnetic sensors. The first 2 nights were uneventful, just wind, crickets, and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. But on the 3rd night, at exactly 2:34 a.m., the same time Harold Knox had encountered the crying woman, their devices picked up a strange fluctuation. The ambient temperature dropped by 12 degrees in less than a minute. Static filled every microphone, and through the noise something faint emerged, a child's voice singing. The team later isolated the audio and enhanced it. The words were almost clear. "The wheels go round. The river's deep." The sound was verified as authentic, not digitally inserted. But when they returned the following week to re-record, The bridge was closed, not by town officials, but because of a sudden landslide that had buried the access road. Strangely, geological reports showed no sign of recent movement in the area. The ground had simply given way. Today, the rebuilt Black Hollow Bridge stands as little more than a cracked memorial. Locals avoid it, and even GPS navigation reroutes travelers away from the area. But every few years, someone ignores the detour. In 2019, a delivery driver named Ben Torres uploaded dashcam footage that went viral for a few days before mysteriously vanishing from the internet. In the clip, filmed at 2:37 a.m., fog rolls in front of his truck as he approaches the hollow. If you leave the town of Asheville after dark, you'll notice the land begins to rise in slow, uneven slopes. The trees thin out, replaced by jagged cliffs that catch the moonlight like glass. Highway 19 cuts straight through those cliffs, a lonely, two-lane passage that locals call the road that breathes. The name came after the avalanche of 1959, when a slab of snow and rock slid down Mount Talon and buried a group of travelers alive. Their bodies were never recovered. For days afterwards, search teams claimed to hear voices coming from beneath the snow, faint, muffled cries that faded with every passing hour. By the time they reached the spot, there was nothing left but packed ice. The road was cleared, the dead were listed as lost, and the highway reopened. But within a year, drivers started reporting something strange. The asphalt itself seemed to move. On cold nights, mist would rise from the ground like breath from an open mouth. And sometimes, just as tires rolled over certain patches of the highway, a low groaning sound would echo through the valley, as if something deep below was struggling to breathe again. One of the earliest official reports came from Deputy Carl Wesson, who patrolled Asheville County in the early 1970s. He was known for his skepticism, a grounded man who didn't believe in ghost stories. But after one winter patrol, his attitude changed. It was February 17, 1974. A blizzard had shut down most of the county, and Wesson was tasked with checking for stranded vehicles along Highway 19. Around 1 a.m., his cruiser began to shake slightly, not from wind, but from something deeper, rhythmic, like the tremor of distant thunder. He stopped near mile marker 42, stepped out, and immediately noticed the warmth. Despite the sub-zero temperature, a wave of heat rolled from the ground, melting the snow in uneven circles. The road was steaming, as though something beneath the asphalt exhaled. At first, he thought it was geothermal, maybe a fault line, some natural vent. But then he saw them, faint handprints forming in the snow on his windshield. They appeared slowly, one by one, from the inside out, as though someone were trapped beneath the glass, pressing upward. Wesson backed away and drew his flashlight. The moment the beam hit the road, the ground gave a soft groan. He described it later as 1,000 lungs trying to inhale at once. The asphalt bulged upward, cracked slightly, then settled flat again. When he returned to his car, the dashboard clock was frozen at 1:17. He'd been gone 7 minutes, but the recording in his radio log jumped 34 minutes ahead. He retired 6 months later. In the decades that followed, truckers and travelers told similar stories of headlights flickering, engines stalling, and the feeling of pressure building in their ears as if the entire valley were holding its breath. A driver named Leah Matthews recalled driving through during a thunderstorm in 1998. "I was alone, hauling dry goods to Missoula," she told a local AM station years later. "Lightning flashed, and for a second I saw faces under the road, pale, pressed into the surface like the pavement was made of skin." The interviewer laughed nervously. Leah didn't. She said she pulled over shaking and turned off her engine. The storm went silent. No wind, no thunder, no sound at all. Then, from somewhere beneath her truck, came a faint tapping. Tap, 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 like knuckles against steel. When she climbed out to look, she saw the gravel shifting beside her tires, and then something whispered her name. She swore the voice came from the road itself. In 2005, a construction crew was hired to repave a section of Highway 19 that had developed sinkholes. According to county logs, during the first week of digging, workers uncovered large discolored cavities beneath the road, as though the earth had hollowed out naturally. But what caught their attention were the items inside, a torn leather boot. A frozen watch stopped at 2:41, and what looked like the remains of an old steering wheel, still gripped by skeletal hands. Forensics estimated the bones had been buried for decades, possibly since the 1959 avalanche. But that wasn't the strange part. Each of the bones was coated in something resembling fine soot, later identified as burnt asphalt. It was as if the mountain itself had absorbed the dead. After that discovery, the repaving project was halted. The county quietly rerouted traffic, claiming unstable conditions, but locals knew better. They said every time the crew tore up part of the road, the mountain breathed harder. Some even claimed to hear coughing, low, distant, like thunder echoing from underground tunnels. A few years later, an independent documentarian named Russ Tanner visited Asheville to make a short film about the phenomenon. He camped near the highway for 3 nights with a thermal camera and an EMF meter. His footage, later uploaded online, shows a mostly uneventful first day. Empty road, passing storms, no movement. But at 2 a.m. on the 3rd night, the camera begins to pick up something extraordinary. The temperature spikes by nearly 15 degrees in seconds. The ground starts pulsing faintly, rhythmically. Then, a shape appears in the thermal feed, a glowing outline beneath the asphalt, stretching the length of several yards. It expands, contracts, expands again, as though the road itself were inhaling. Russ's voice can be heard whispering, "It's alive. Oh my God, it's alive." Moments later, the footage cuts out. His tent was found shredded, his equipment scattered. His car, still parked at the roadside, had its windows fogged from the inside. With a single word written in the condensation, "Breathe," Tanner was never found. Today, Highway 19 remains open but mostly avoided at night. GPS often flickers out between mile markers 40 and 45. Travelers who pass through during winter report hearing soft, rhythmic sounds under their wheels, like someone knocking from beneath the ground. Geologists dismiss it as shifting permafrost. Locals know better. They say the mountain never let go of those it swallowed. Every inhale brings them closer to the surface. If you ever find yourself on Highway 19 during a snowstorm, roll down your window. Listen carefully. You might hear the mountain breathe, and if it exhales, pray you're not standing on the road when it does. They renamed it years ago, tried to bury its infamy under a new number, hoping asphalt and fresh signage could erase decades of whispered stories. But to locals, truckers, and the unlucky souls who've had to drive it after dark, it's still known as the Devil's Highway. U.S. Route 666 cuts through the heart of New Mexico's high desert, a long, desolate stretch flanked by crimson mesas, where the horizon seems to swallow the road whole. There's something ancient about that landscape, something that hums beneath the sand, older than the pavement itself. Most travelers describe it as unnervingly empty. No gas stations for miles, no cell service, just the wind clawing at the sides of your car and the smell of hot asphalt stretching into infinity. Those who've driven through after sunset talk about how the temperature drops unnaturally fast, the desert air turning cold enough to sting, the stars unnervingly sharp, the silence almost sentient. But what truly cements this road's cursed reputation are the stories that have endured for generations. Truckers whisper about phantom headlights that appear suddenly behind them, racing up the highway at impossible speeds, only to vanish moments before impact. Others speak of a jet-black sedan, headlights off, tailing them for miles before overtaking them with a blast of heat and wind that smells faintly of sulfur. Locals call it the Hound of Hell, a demonic car said to hunt the living. One of the most terrifying accounts came from a long-haul driver named Frank Delgado, who broke his silence in a radio interview in the late 1990s. He'd been making a run through the area just past Gallup, hauling construction equipment to Flagstaff. It was just past 2 a.m. when his CB radio crackled with static, followed by a faint voice whispering, "Get off the road." He thought it was a prank, maybe another driver. But when he tried to respond, his radio died completely. Moments later, he noticed something strange in his rearview mirror. 2 points of light cresting the hill behind him. Headlights. At first, they seemed distant, but within seconds they were gaining on him. Fast, too fast. Frank's truck was maxed out at 70 mph, but those lights were closing in like a missile. He gripped the wheel, heart hammering, and reached for his radio again. Still dead. Then came the There are roads where darkness feels thicker, where headlights seem swallowed whole by the trees, and even the air seems to hold its breath. Archer Avenue in Justice, Illinois is one of them. Winding through patches of dense forest and old stone bridges, the road feels more like a passage through time than a modern thoroughfare. Locals say the fog hits harder there, heavier than anywhere else around Chicago. And when it does, it brings something with it. Something that doesn't belong to the living. The legend of Resurrection Mary is almost a century old now, but for those who've seen her, the memory doesn't fade. She's described as a young woman in a white dress, barefoot with pale blonde hair and eyes that shimmer like frost in the headlights. Some call her a ghost. Others say she's a remnant of a tragedy so sharp it tore open the line between life and death. The first recorded sighting came in the late 1930s, when a cab driver pulled into a Southside police station shaking and pale. He said he'd picked up a young woman near the Willowbrook Ballroom, a popular dance hall back then, who asked for a ride down Archer Avenue. She was quiet, polite, and distant, staring out the window as the car rolled through the winding road. But when they passed the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, she whispered, "Stop here." He turned to ask why, but she was gone. The car door hadn't opened. There were no footprints on the damp roadside. Just an empty back seat and the echo of her perfume, lilies and cold rain. Decades later, the same pattern continued. Different witnesses, same description. Men driving alone late at night would see a young woman walking along the side of the road in a white gown, sometimes thumbing for a ride, sometimes just drifting through the mist. If they stopped, she would speak softly, ask for a lift, and vanish before they reached the cemetery gates. But what most people don't know is how many modern reports still surface, not as urban legends, but as police calls logged and documented. Between 1973 and 2019, over 24 911 calls described a woman in distress walking barefoot along Archer Avenue near the cemetery. By the time officers arrived, there was never anyone there. One of the most chilling accounts came from Officer Daniel Reyes, a veteran patrolman for Cook County. He recounted the event to a local journalist in 1998, but asked for anonymity at the time, fearing ridicule. His story was later confirmed through dispatch logs. It was a cold October night, around 1:15 a.m., when Reyes received a report of a possible pedestrian accident near the cemetery gates. When he arrived, his headlights caught something white standing in the fog, a woman in a long dress, motionless, facing the cemetery fence. Reyes stopped, got out of his cruiser, and called out. She didn't move. As he approached, he noticed her feet, bare, dirty, and standing on the frost-hardened ground. She looked over her shoulder, and for a second, their eyes met. He described them as colorless, just pale light, like reflected moonshine on glass. Then she stepped forward, through the iron bars of the gate, as if the metal wasn't even there, and vanished. Reyes searched the grounds for 20 minutes. Nothing, just fog rolling through the tombstones and the creak of wind through the trees. When he got back to his car, his radio crackled to life. A dispatcher's voice broke through, saying, "Unit 42, you still responding to that hit and run?" He froze. The timestamp on the call was 1:14 a.m., the same minute he had already been at the scene. He never could explain how that was possible. Locals have their own theories about who Resurrection Mary really was. Some say she was a young woman named Mary Bregovy, killed in a car accident after leaving a dance at the Willowbrook Ballroom in the early 1930s. Her parents buried her in her favorite white dress, the same one witnesses still describe. Others believe she isn't one spirit, but many, restless souls drawn to the energy of Archer Avenue itself, a place where the veil between worlds is thinner than paper. Truckers who pass through often talk about the strange interference that hits their CB radios in that area. Static whispers or faint traces of 1930s jazz drifting through the speakers for a few seconds before cutting off entirely. A few have even reported seeing a figure in white appear briefly in their mirrors, walking along the shoulder, then gone in the blink of an eye. The air on Archer Avenue always feels different. The scent of damp earth, the sound of wind moving through empty trees, and sometimes the faintest trace of lilies carried on a cold draft through an open window. In 1976, the cemetery's caretakers discovered something unsettling. Two of the heavy iron bars on the front gate appeared burned and bent apart, as if someone had tried to force their way through. The impressions looked like handprints, but the surface wasn't rusted or corroded. It was scorched, melted by some impossible heat. Those bars remain in place today, twisted relics that draw ghost hunters and skeptics alike. At night, the air around them feels heavier, and sometimes, if the fog's thick enough, you can see faint handprints appear in the frost on the nearby fence, just for a moment before fading back into the cold. The sightings haven't stopped. Each decade brings new witnesses, drivers, police, teenagers, night shift workers, all telling the same story in different words. A girl in white, lost, cold, looking for a ride home. But home, it seems, is a place she's never been able to reach. And if you ever find yourself driving down Archer Avenue after midnight, through the fog and past the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, keep your eyes on the road, because sometimes in that pale wash of your headlights, you might see her, walking just ahead of you, waiting for someone kind enough to stop. They say Archer Avenue has two faces, one that belongs to the living and another that wakes only after midnight. In daylight, it's unremarkable, an old Illinois roadway winding through industrial edges, patches of woods, and the occasional roadside diner. But after dark, something changes. The trees seem to lean closer. The road narrows. The hum of the engine grows louder, echoing against a silence that feels almost aware. Locals have long warned travelers to avoid that stretch between the Willowbrook Ballroom and Resurrection Cemetery after midnight. It's not just because of the winding turns or the thick fog that rolls in from the Des Plaines River. It's because of her. The vanishing girl who never makes it home. The one they call Resurrection Mary. The story begins in the early 1930s. A young woman, believed to be Mary Bregovy, was out dancing at the Willowbrook Ballroom, a place that once pulsed with laughter, swing music, and neon light. That night, witnesses remember her dancing with a young man until around midnight. Then, after a heated argument, she stormed out and began walking home along Archer Avenue, in her white party dress and heels. She never made it. Hours later, a driver reported hitting something, or someone, near the cemetery gates. He claimed the figure appeared out of nowhere, illuminated by the headlights only for a second before the impact. But when police arrived, they found no body, no blood, and no signs of a collision. Just a single woman's shoe lying in the ditch, and the faint scent of lilies carried by the wind. Since then, Mary has appeared to countless drivers, always the same way, always at the same place. Some see her walking, others see her standing motionless beneath the cemetery gates, hands clasped like she's waiting for someone. Sometimes she accepts rides. Sometimes she simply appears inside cars without warning. The temperature drops, the air fills with the scent of flowers, and then she vanishes. One of the most chilling encounters came in 1978. A man named Jerry Pallas, a local musician, left a dance at the same Willowbrook Ballroom around midnight. He saw a young woman standing near the entrance, barefoot, wearing a white dress. She seemed lost, so he offered her a ride. She smiled faintly and said she lived a little way down Archer. As they drove, she said almost nothing, only staring out the window. But when they passed the cemetery, she turned her head slowly and said, "This is where I need to go." He glanced toward the gates, then back at her. She was gone. No sound, no movement, just the lingering scent of her perfume. When he stepped out and searched the road, the night was empty except for a low fog crawling along the fence line. A week later, still haunted, Jerry visited Resurrection Cemetery to clear his mind. As he walked among the headstones, he stopped cold. There it was, her name, Mary Bregovy, died 1934. He swore the picture on the headstone was the same face he'd seen in his passenger seat. Modern reports tell of something even more disturbing, not just apparitions, but interference. In 2011, a group of paranormal researchers set up motion cameras near the cemetery's main gate. Between 2 and 3 a.m., one of the cameras recorded a pale figure crossing the road, translucent, moving faster than any human stride. When they slowed the footage, the figure's dress shimmered like wet silk, and for a single frame, her eyes reflected light like an animal's. Even more unsettling was the audio. Though no one was present, the microphone picked up a whisper, faint, broken, and distant. 3 words, "Take me home." Truckers who drive through Archer Avenue often mention white blips on their radar or GPS. short-lived pings that appear near. There are stretches of road so quiet that your own heartbeat becomes a sound you can't ignore. Clinton Road in West Milford, New Jersey is one of those places. A winding, tree-choked two-lane that twists through 20 miles of dense forest, forgotten stone ruins, and shadows that never seem to lift. Locals call it the loneliest road in America, but that's only part of the story. The truth is, Clinton Road isn't just lonely. It's haunted to its bones. The road's history is older than most of the towns around it. Long before asphalt and headlights, the Lenape tribes called the surrounding forest a forbidden ground, a place where the dead walked beside the living. Centuries later, settlers built an ironworks here, only for it to burn down in the 1800s under mysterious circumstances. Since then, the area has been a magnet for tragedy, disappearances, drownings, unsolved murders. Some say the woods themselves are cursed, swallowing those who wander too far. But of all the stories Clinton Road carries, none is told more often, or more quietly, than the one about the ghost boy of the bridge. Just past mile marker 10, the road crosses a narrow, crumbling bridge over a dark stream called Dead Man's Curve. If you stop your car in the middle of the bridge and toss a coin into the water, legend says a small cold hand will toss it back. It sounds like a campfire tale, a trick of imagination. But the witnesses, dozens over the years, tell the same details with the same haunted conviction. The air turns colder, the forest goes silent, and something small splashes the water before the coin reappears on the pavement, glinting wet under the moonlight. The earliest version of the story dates back to the 1960s, when locals claimed a young boy was struck and killed by a car while retrieving a dropped coin from the bridge. His spirit, they say, still lingers there, warning others not to make the same mistake. In 1989, a man named Paul Matthews, a night shift security guard from Newark, reported his own encounter. His car broke down near the bridge around 2:30 a.m., and with no cell service and no passing traffic, he decided to wait until dawn. He sat in the driver's seat, headlights off, watching fog creep along the tree line. Then, faintly, he heard splashing, soft, rhythmic, like footsteps in shallow water. He turned off the radio. The sound stopped. When it started again, it was closer. He leaned out of the window and called out, thinking maybe a hiker was nearby. Nothing answered. Then he saw it. Movement near the edge of the bridge, small and pale in the moonlight. A child. He described it as a boy around 8 or 9, barefoot, standing knee-deep in the creek below. The child didn't look frightened, only sad. His head tilted slightly, and Paul swore the boy was mouthing words, but there was no sound. Then, as Paul blinked, the boy vanished, leaving behind ripples that spread across the still water. When dawn came, Paul walked down to the creek. There in the silt he found 3 old coins, dull, green with age, and one small footprint beside them. He quit his job a month later, moved to Pennsylvania, and refused to drive Clinton Road again. Over the years, investigators and thrill seekers have tried to debunk the legend. Paranormal groups left cameras and voice recorders near the bridge. Most found nothing, but one recording from 2007 remains infamous in local circles. The team tossed a coin into the water and waited. For 5 minutes, there was nothing but the sound of crickets and running water. Then a soft splash. Moments later, the coin clinked against the microphone stand. When they played back the recording, a child's voice could be heard faintly whispering one word before the splash. Stop. Experts examined the audio, looking for tampering or overlay, but the results were inconclusive. The sound wasn't consistent with playback or environmental noise. The voice, though faint, carried natural inflection, as if spoken in real time only a few feet from the microphone. Clinton Road has more than one ghost. There are tales of phantom trucks that chase drivers before vanishing into thin air, of lights deep in the forest that move against the wind, of a stone circle said to be used by cultists in the 1970s. But the story of the boy is the one that never fades, because it isn't angry. It's tragic, and it feels personal. Some say he appears only to people who carry guilt, travelers who've done something they regret. Others think he's a guardian spirit, trying to keep the living from making the same fatal mistake that took his life. One local officer, Sergeant Tom Leary, told of a late-night patrol in 2014. He'd parked his cruiser near the bridge, running radar, when his dashcam flickered. For 2 seconds, a small figure crossed the screen, no taller than 4 feet, translucent, walking along the railing. The car's interior temperature dropped to nearly 10 degrees. Then his engine stalled. When he restarted it, the figure was gone. Later, when reviewing the footage, the timestamp had frozen exactly at 3:03 a.m., the same minute his radio reported interference. People still drive Clinton Road for the thrill. Headlights cutting through fog, adrenaline masking unease. They stop on the bridge, drop coins, and dare the ghost to answer. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes the air shifts, the forest stills, and a ripple breaks the surface below. Locals say if your coin comes back, don't take it. Leave it where it lands. It's a sign of respect, or maybe a warning. And if you stand there long enough, peering down into the dark water, you might see him. A small face just beneath the surface, eyes open watching, every once in a while. On windless nights, drivers passing by claim to see a shape crouched on the side of the bridge, a boy in old-fashioned clothes, waiting for someone to stop. They say he disappears as soon as headlights touch him. But those who felt that cold, child-sized hand brush theirs when tossing a coin, they never forget it. The skin was wet, they say, but colder than the water could ever be, and when they drive away, the sound of the coin clinking on the pavement echoes in their ears for miles, long after the bridge has disappeared behind them. Some roads you travel once. Clinton Road travels with you. There's something about Clinton Road that doesn't let go. It's not just a place people pass through, it's a place that follows them home. Those who've been there talk about strange things that start after they leave. Car radios turning on by themselves, coins appearing on nightstands, the faint sound of splashing water in the distance. It's as though the boy from the bridge remembers the people who dared to summon him. And sometimes, he wants to remind them he's still waiting. Locals will tell you that Clinton Road has been cursed since the very beginning. The surrounding forest, the Ramapo Mountains, hides ruins of old colonial settlements and abandoned mine shafts. At night, the trees swallow sound, and even the wind moves strangely, circling back on itself like a whisper that can't find an escape. The few who live nearby call it a dead zone, where cell signals vanish, compasses spin, and headlights seem to dim for no reason. Those who've seen the ghost boy say he's different from other spirits. He doesn't flicker or fade. He's solid, real enough to make footprints in the mud, but his skin is colorless, like candle wax, and his eyes have that vacant look, as though they're searching for something just beyond you. In 1993, a local couple, Hannah and David Morrow, claimed to have seen the boy during a late-night drive. They were returning home from a friend's house in Newfoundland, taking Clinton Road as a shortcut. The night was moonless, and the fog was so thick it felt alive. As they crossed the bridge, David saw movement, a figure standing just beyond the railing, hunched over as if looking for something in the water. At first, he thought it was an animal. But then the figure straightened, a small boy, pale as chalk, clothes soaked through. Hannah rolled down her window to ask if he was all right. Before she could speak, the boy looked up. His mouth opened as if to say something, but no sound came out. Then, as if he'd never been there, he vanished, leaving behind a sound that David swore was the clink of a coin hitting metal. When they got home, shaken and pale, they unpacked their groceries, and there, sitting on the kitchen counter, was a single coin. It was old, tarnished, and wet. David threw it away the next morning, but every time he opened the drawer where he'd dropped it, he could still smell the creak, damp earth and iron. Paranormal investigators have spent years trying to understand Clinton Road. Electromagnetic readings spike for no reason. Cameras malfunction even on new batteries. One thermal scan taken near the bridge revealed a distinct outline of a small figure crouched by the water. Faint but unmistakable. When the team returned to the same spot minutes later, the reading was gone. The water, however, there's a stretch of steel and stone in Queens, New York. Massive, rusted, and brooding, known as the Hell Gate Bridge. Its name alone unsettles people, but it's not just the title that earned it, it's infamy. Locals whisper that once you cross it, you invite something aboard, something unseen, something that never gets off. The bridge arches over the East River, connecting Astoria to Randall's Island. Trains thunder across it day and night, their vibrations shaking the girders like bones. To most commuters, it's just part of the city. another forgotten relic of early 20th century engineering. But to the conductors and maintenance crews who've worked it long enough, Hellgate is alive. They'll tell you the bridge listens. It began during the 1930s when workers were completing the final structural reinforcements. One night, a cable snapped loose and dragged a worker named Samuel Greeley into the dark waters below. His body was never found. In the weeks that followed, crews reported strange things. Footsteps echoing across the upper platform long after everyone had gone home. The sound of hammering coming from empty scaffolds, and the eerie clang of metal tools tapping rhythmically, like someone still working. One engineer claimed that every time he crossed the bridge at night, he'd hear faint singing under the roar of the train, a deep, gravelly hum that followed the rhythm of the tracks. They say Samuel never stopped working. Decades passed, but Hellgate's reputation only grew darker. Trains crossing late at night began to experience unexplained malfunctions. Electrical surges fried circuits. Lights flickered for miles. Conductors started reporting phantom passengers, shapes glimpsed in the corner of their eyes, reflections of people sitting motionless in empty seats. One such report came from engineer Thomas Myers in 1957. He was running a freight train toward Manhattan just past midnight when, midway across the bridge, the train's emergency brakes slammed on by themselves. He checked every car, all secure. But when he returned to the engine, he saw condensation forming on the inside of the glass, as if someone had exhaled near his face. Then, in the faint reflection of the windshield, he saw a man, drenched, pale, eyes wide and unblinking, sitting in the secondary seat. Myers spun around. No one was there, but when he looked back, the seat was soaked through. The paperwork from that night simply read, "Unexplained braking incident." Possible electrical fault. Urban legends grew. People began calling the figure the Eternal Passenger. Some say he was the ghost of Samuel, doomed to ride the bridge forever. Others claim it's the spirit of a drowning victim from the Hellgate's waters, a place so deadly that even sailors used to avoid sailing near it. Before the bridge, that stretch of river was infamous for shipwrecks. The currents twisted violently between the rocks, dragging boats and bodies into the depths. Hundreds died there before the 20th century. Locals began to call it Hell's Gate, and the name stuck. But the legends got stranger. In the 1970s, graffiti artists began tagging the bridge's lower levels. Some reported hearing trains rumbling above, even when none were scheduled. Others said they saw figures standing on the tracks in the dark, unmoving, featureless, as if made of shadow. One artist named Luis Ortega disappeared in 1979 after telling friends he'd caught a glimpse of something huge under the bridge while tagging. His spray cans and flashlight were found in the mud days later. No one ever found him. By the 1990s, the subway operators had their own ghost stories. The MTA started documenting odd electrical faults on trains that had recently crossed the Hellgate. Security footage would glitch at the same moment each night, 3:13 a.m., showing static that briefly resembled a human face. One conductor, Lillian Park, said she felt someone brush past her shoulder while closing the train doors one foggy morning. "Cold, like river water," she said. When she turned, she saw wet footprints leading down the aisle, stopping at an empty seat by the window. For the rest of the trip, she swore she could hear shallow breathing behind her. The only passenger on board was asleep. Her colleagues laughed at first, until it started happening to them too. Today, locals avoid walking the paths beneath Hellgate Bridge after dark. Cyclists claim they can hear whispers from above, faint and low, carried on the wind from the train tracks. Some even report seeing a figure pacing along the upper girders, silhouetted against the city lights, vanishing when they blink. Rail workers have a superstition. When crossing Hellgate at night, never look out the left window. They say that's where he appears. If you do, he might notice you, and once he does, you'll start seeing him everywhere. In reflections, in puddles, in the glass of subway cars, always the same expression. Hollow-eyed, dripping wet, staring straight through you. A retired MTA inspector, James O'Reilly, broke his silence in a 2011 interview. He'd worked the Hellgate line for 25 years and said he'd seen it all, until one night in 1998. His train stopped midway over the river due to a power failure. When he stepped out to check the tracks, he heard it, footsteps approaching from the opposite direction, heavy and metallic. He shone his flashlight, but the beam only cut through mist. Then, from that fog, a hand pressed against his shoulder. "It was ice cold," he said. And when I turned, there was no one. He swore that as he looked down at the East River below, he saw faces in the water, dozens of them, pale and drifting just beneath the surface, all staring upward. When the power returned and the train lurched forward, the faces vanished. He retired the next month. To this day, conductors report strange occurrences on the bridge, lights dimming, radios cutting out, the faint smell of brine filling the cabin. Some believe the bridge acts as a threshold, a place where the dead are drawn to cross over, carried by the trains that thunder through the night. But the truth may be simpler and far more terrifying. Maybe it's not just one ghost that haunts Hellgate Bridge. Maybe it's every soul the river ever claimed, bound together in the steel and the bolts, in the constant rattle of iron. Because if you listen closely while crossing, when the train slows and the city noise fades, you can sometimes hear it, a low rhythmic thud beneath your feet. Not the tracks, not the engine. It's the sound of something climbing up from the water, and if you ever feel the seat beside you grow damp, don't look. Don't breathe. Just pray the train doesn't stop. The wind that night over the East River was heavy with mist, a damp metallic breath that clung to the bridge like a shroud. The Hellgate loomed in the fog, massive, arching, its girders trembling as a freight train rolled across. The city lights flickered below, reduced to faint glimmers reflected in black water. Few people realize how truly isolated the bridge feels in those hours after midnight. From the middle span, the city disappears. You can't hear the horns, or the chatter, or the rhythm of nightlife. There's only the creak of steel, the steady hum of current, and the whisper of wind between the beams. It's a kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it watches. Engineer Daniel Rivera knew that silence all too well. He'd been driving trains along the Hellgate line for over a decade, and for years he dismissed the ghost stories as superstition. Metal groans, wind howls, systems glitch, he'd say. But after one stormy night in 2008, his confidence broke. It was around 2:45 a.m. Lightning danced across the sky, cutting brief, violent shapes through the mist. Rivera's train was running behind schedule, carrying freight bound for Manhattan. The bridge was slick, glistening from earlier rain. As the train rolled into the midpoint, the cabin lights flickered. Then silence. Power out. He tried to restart the auxiliary systems, but the dashboard remained dead. No engine hum, no static on the radio. Nothing but the sound of rain striking the windshield like 1,000 fingertips. And beneath it, faint tapping. At first he thought it was dripping from the overhead panels. But the taps were rhythmic, deliberate. 1 2 1 2, coming from the maintenance walkway outside. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the mist. The beam cut through only a few feet ahead, enough to see the metal grating slick with rain stretching into endless fog. That's when he noticed the footprints, bare, human, wet. They led along the walkway toward the center of the bridge, where the fog was thickest. Rivera froze. If you drive through the heart of the American Southwest, that scorched, endless stretch of desert between Gallup and Shiprock, New Mexico, you'll find yourself on a road that used to bear an infamous name, U.S. Route 666. They call it the Devil's Highway, though the number was changed in 2003 to U.S. Route 491. Locals still call it by its original name, and still avoid driving it after dark. Because for decades, the asphalt itself has been cursed. The road cuts through barren red desert, with mesas rising like tombstones and the sun setting blood red behind them. By day, it's hauntingly beautiful, but by night, it becomes a corridor of pure desolation. The only light comes from your headlights and the occasional flicker of lightning far beyond the horizon. Radio signals fade, cell service dies, and the silence, it's absolute. Truckers who run freight through the area talk about it in hushed tones over diner coffee. Men who've seen things they won't describe out loud. Figures walking in the desert miles from anywhere. Lights that tailgate them for miles, then vanish. Voices on the CB radio that don't belong to anyone on the frequency. It's said that the devil himself built this road, or at least he travels it. The earliest records of strange phenomena on Route 66 date back to the 1950s, when the road was first paved. Locals began reporting black sedans that would appear from nowhere, chasing drivers down the highway at incredible speed. The cars never passed, never slowed. They simply stayed behind, their high beams burning white-hot, until the driver pulled over in terror. When they looked back, the road was empty. One witness, a rancher named Henry Wallace, reported being followed by 3 such sedans one night in 1956. He claimed they surrounded his truck, their engines screaming, boxing him in. Panicking, he slammed the brakes, and the cars vanished. The next morning, his truck was found in a ditch, engine still running, doors locked from the inside. Henry was never seen again. Local authorities called it fatigue. His wife called it something else, the Devil's Escort. But the most famous legend tied to Route 66 is that of the Skinwalker. Navajo elders have spoken for generations about a creature, a twisted witch capable of taking on the form of animals, or even people, that stalks the desert at night. The highway cuts directly through sacred land, and they say that when the road was built, it disturbed something that should have been left alone. Truckers have described seeing coyotes that walk on 2 legs, keeping pace with their rigs at impossible speeds. Others say they've seen a man, naked and pale, running along the shoulder, his face stretched unnaturally wide, grinning as the headlights pass over him. One of the most detailed accounts came from Officer Daniel Chavez of the New Mexico State Patrol. In 1983, he responded to a call about a stalled vehicle near mile marker 37, a remote section with no lighting for miles. When he arrived, he found a blue sedan sitting on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. The driver's door was open. No one inside. At first glance, it looked like a breakdown. But then Chavez noticed something disturbing. Claw marks. Long, deep gouges running across the trunk, the roof, the hood. They weren't animal scratches. They were too even, too deliberate. He walked the perimeter with his flashlight, and about 20 feet from the car, he found bare footprints in the sand, human-shaped, but distorted. The toes were elongated, sharp, like talons. The trail led into the desert and stopped suddenly, as if whatever made them had leapt into the air. After that night, Chavez refused to patrol Route 666 alone. But the stories kept coming. Drivers vanishing. Cars found empty. One woman reported picking up a young girl hitchhiking near the Shiprock turnoff. Pale skin, long black hair, wearing a torn white dress. She didn't speak, only stared straight ahead. Halfway through the drive, the woman looked away for a moment, and when she turned back, the passenger seat was empty. Only the faint scent of sulfur lingered in the car. She later told police that when she reached the next town, she found burn marks on the seat where the girl had been sitting. Locals began leaving offerings near the mile markers, sage bundles, stones, crosses. Some swore it helped. Others claimed the road feeds on fear, that it wants people to remember its name. Even after officials renamed it, accidents continued. The new sign, US 491, couldn't erase what was carved into the asphalt. A journalist named Martha Lewis investigated the phenomena in 1999, interviewing residents who lived near the road. One told her that late at night he could hear engines roaring through the desert. But when he looked out, there were no lights. Just the sound of something massive passing unseen. She published her findings under the headline, "The Highway That Belongs to the Dead." 2 weeks later, Martha's car was found abandoned near the Four Corners Monument, the engine running, the doors open, her notebook on the seat. Her body was never recovered. Over the years, some skeptics have tried to explain away the stories. They blame fatigue, dehydration, desert mirages, but locals know better. They've seen the way the road changes after dark, how it seems to stretch, like it's alive, pulling you deeper into the desert than you meant to go. They tell newcomers to never stop on Route 666. No matter what you see, no matter who waves you down. Because sometimes it's not a person at all. Sometimes it's it. One trucker, Bill Harding, broke that rule in 2002. He saw a man standing in the middle of the road, thin, shaking, waving his arms for help. Bill hit the brakes, stopping just in time. He got out, flashlight in hand. The man was gone. But in the beam of light, Bill saw something crawling along the asphalt on all fours, fast, jerking, its limbs bending the wrong way. He scrambled back to his cab, slammed the door, and watched in horror as the figure leapt onto the hood, pressing its face against the glass. It smiled, then it was gone. By morning, Bill's truck was found idling on the shoulder. The windshield was cracked from the outside, as though struck by something with immense force. Bill himself was found 2 miles away, stumbling down the highway, covered in scratches and mud, muttering over and over. It ran faster than the wind. It ran faster than God. He never drove again. Today, Route 491 still stretches through the desert, but the locals know its true name. The asphalt hums with something ancient, something waiting. Every few months, a car goes missing. Every so often, a trucker refuses to talk about what he saw near Shiprock. And on moonless nights, when the wind dies and the desert holds its breath, you can sometimes hear it. The growl of engines that don't exist. Somewhere out there between the mesas and the sand, something's still driving. Something that never turns off its headlights. And if you ever find yourself on that road alone, late at night, and see a pair of bright lights appear suddenly in your rearview mirror, don't pull over. Don't stop. Don't even blink. Because by the time you look again, they'll already be gone. And you'll know deep down that whatever was following you wasn't from this world. The desert night along Route 666 doesn't just feel empty, it feels aware. The air hums, faint and low, like a living thing breathing through the sand. The highway stretches endlessly in both directions, its faded yellow lines disappearing into blackness. Out here, there are no landmarks, no lights, no sound, but the whine of your tires and the blood pounding in your ears. Locals will tell you the road changes after midnight, that it moves. They say mile markers shift, exits appear where there shouldn't be any, and familiar turns vanish. You could drive for hours and end up in the same spot. They call it the loop. The legend began in 1987, when a delivery driver named Frank Morales vanished somewhere between Gallup and Cortez. His truck was later found parked neatly on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking, door wide open. Inside, the cab was spotless, no signs of a struggle, except for one thing. The odometer read 6 on. There's a stretch of road in the Arizona desert that locals only drive during the day. Highway 117, cutting through the barren outskirts of a dying town called Coldwater. At first glance, it's nothing but sun-bleached asphalt and scrubland. But as dusk settles and the desert cools, this road becomes something else entirely. For decades, travelers have spoken of a woman in white, wandering the shoulder near mile marker 43. Some call her the Coldwater Bride. Others simply call her the one who never made it home. Highway 117 was built in the 1950s, meant to connect the mining towns scattered between Prescott and Tucson. But Coldwater was already fading then. Its mines dry, its residents leaving one by one. The few who remained talked about a wedding tragedy that cursed the road forever. According to local archives, on June 21, 1957, a young woman named Evelyn Harper was set to marry a man named Daniel Ross, a local mechanic. The morning of the wedding, Daniel's truck veered off the road just outside town, flipping into a ravine. He died instantly. When the news reached Evelyn, she ran from the church still in her white gown, barefoot, hysterical. Witnesses claimed she sprinted down Highway 117, crying Daniel's name, before disappearing into the desert night. Her body was never found, but her presence never left. Truckers first began reporting sightings in the late 1970s. One driver, Harold "Red" McConnell, described it like this in a CB radio interview archived by a Phoenix radio station. I was driving south toward Tucson around midnight. Headlights hit this figure on the shoulder. Long white dress, just glowing. Thought I'd hit a bride. Slammed the brakes so hard my coffee hit the windshield. But when I got out, there was nobody there. Just sand, wind, and tire marks. The weird part, my cab was ice cold like I'd just opened a freezer door. His story spread among long-haul drivers. They started calling the stretch the Bride's Mile. Some claimed she appeared standing in the middle of the road. Others said they saw her reflection in their rearview mirror, sitting quietly in the back seat. A few described hearing faint sobbing through their radios, static that formed her name, Evelyn. Local authorities dismissed it as folklore until a string of accidents began piling up around mile marker 43. Most involved lone drivers who swerved violently off the road, claiming to have seen a figure step out from the dark. One 1998 report details a man named Travis Kane, who survived after flipping his pickup at 2 a.m. near that exact spot. He told police he saw a woman waving him down on the shoulder, her dress dirty, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked like she needed help, Travis said. So I slowed down. But when I rolled my window down, she looked right at me, and her eyes were just black holes. Then she screamed. The next thing I remember, my truck was upside down in the ditch. The case was ruled an accident caused by fatigue. But locals knew better. In 2005, Coldwater's only diner, Betty's Stop, became a gathering place for ghost hunters. They came with EVP recorders, thermal cameras, and a hunger for proof. One team claimed to have captured audio of a woman whispering, "Where's Daniel?" Another investigator's footage showed what appeared to be a faint glowing silhouette drifting across the road. The film was shaky, blurred, but the outline was unmistakable, a bride's veil, fluttering against the desert wind. A paranormal researcher named Dr. Howard Klee, who studied regional hauntings, described Highway 117 as a psychic loop, a place where grief repeats itself eternally, anchored by tragedy. He theorized Evelyn's spirit was searching for her fiancé, still trying to reach the crash site after nearly 70 years. Even today, some truckers report strange malfunctions near Coldwater. GPS units fail, radios cut to static, and engine temperatures drop inexplicably. One driver wrote online in 2021, "Passing mile marker 43, my dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Then I saw her in my mirror, sitting behind me. Couldn't see her face, but I saw the white dress clear as day. I pulled over, jumped out, and when I turned around, the seat was empty." Locals say if you pull over and call her name 3 times, "Evelyn Harper, come home," you'll hear the desert wind shift. Some say it carries her sobs. Others say you'll feel a hand brush your shoulder, cold as the grave. The Arizona Department of Transportation quietly installed extra guardrails along that section in 2012, citing poor visibility. But those who've driven it at night know the truth. Visibility isn't the problem. She wants to be seen. To this day, travelers still leave wedding flowers and trinkets along the shoulder. Dried bouquets, broken veils, sometimes a single white shoe. Each one a silent tribute or a warning. And if you ever find yourself driving that lonely stretch of Highway 117 under the cold moonlight, keep your eyes on the road. Because the moment you look into your rearview mirror, you might just see Evelyn Harper, still in her wedding dress, waiting for someone who never made it home. The Arizona desert has a way of swallowing sound. By day, Highway 117 is a strip of cracked asphalt framed by scorched sagebrush and long horizons that shimmer with heat. But by night, when the sun bleeds out behind the mesas, that same landscape turns into an ocean of darkness, endless, silent, and cold. Truckers say it's one of the loneliest highways in America. Locals, however, say it's one of the most haunted. The bride who never made it home, Coldwater wasn't always a ghost town. In the 1940s, it was a bustling mining community, copper, silver, and a vein of turquoise that once promised prosperity. But when the mines dried up, so did the town's spirit. The last store closed in 1968. Now, all that remains are broken windows, empty foundations, and a road that seems to hum with something old and restless. Among the few stories that survive the town's fall, one is told with hushed reverence, the story of Evelyn Harper, the Coldwater bride. She was 23 years old, the daughter of a rancher. With hair as dark as mesquite wood and a smile that could cut through the dust, Daniel Ross, her fiancé, worked as a mechanic at Coldwater Auto. They were to marry in June of 1957, a small church ceremony before driving to Phoenix for their honeymoon. But Daniel never made it. At 9:42 a.m. on the morning of the wedding, Daniel's Chevy pickup was found upside down in a dry ravine just off mile marker 43. Witnesses said the truck looked as if it had swerved violently, though no tire tracks led up to the edge, as if something had forced him off the road. When the sheriff broke the news, Evelyn collapsed. Then, in her torn wedding dress, she ran down the steps of the church, barefoot, veil trailing behind her like a ghostly banner. She ran screaming Daniel's name down Highway 117 until the heat waves swallowed her figure whole. She was never seen again. 3 days later, a search party found her veil snagged on a barbed wire fence. Her body was never recovered. The first known sighting came 20 years later. A driver named Harold Red McConnell, a long-haul trucker from Amarillo, was passing through just before midnight. His account, preserved in a radio broadcast from 1978, still sends chills through anyone who hears it. "I was hauling freight southbound around..." There's a road that slices through the Nevada desert, a desolate stretch of asphalt flanked by sagebrush and silence. Route 375, officially designated the extraterrestrial highway. It's a name tourists find charming, a marketing trick tied to the nearby mystery of Area 51. But for the people who live near those long miles between Rachel and Warm Springs, the name isn't a joke. It's a warning, because what haunts Route 375 doesn't always look like a ghost. Sometimes, it looks like light. The road that watches back locals call this area the Silence Belt, a patch of land where radios die, compasses spin, and phones lose signal for hours at a time. It's not just because of military interference, they say. The desert itself feels aware, like the sand holds an electric charge. For decades, travelers have reported lights that hover low over the highway, pacing their cars for miles before vanishing. Others describe figures standing in the desert, tall, motionless, and reflecting light even when there's none. Truckers who run the night shift say they can feel it, a vibration in the steering wheel, a faint hum through the engine that grows louder the longer you're alone. The first known incident dates back to March 1962, recorded in Lincoln County Sheriff's Archives. Two men, technicians from Nellis Air Force Base, were driving north on what would later become Route 375. Their statement was brief but chilling. A brilliant white light appeared directly ahead of us at low altitude. The object hovered silently for approximately 30 seconds, then shot upward at extreme speed. No sound, no debris, no trail. The report was classified for years, buried in Air Force paperwork. But the real terror began later, when civilian drivers started seeing the same thing. The woman who vanished in 1977. A young mother named Janet Morris was driving from Tonopah to Rachel with her 6-year-old son. According to the surviving boy's testimony, his mother stopped the car around 11:20 p.m., saying she saw a bright flare ahead. She told him to stay in the back seat. He remembered seeing her walk into the desert, toward a pulsing blue light. She never came back. When authorities found the car the next morning, the driver's door was open, headlights still on, and a faint scorch mark stained the sand 20 feet away. Her body was never recovered. Locals began whispering about the watchers in the desert. Lights that follow in the late 1990s, Route 375 became a hotspot for thrill seekers and UFO hunters. People camped along the road at night with cameras, scanners, and binoculars. Most saw nothing, but a few captured what they couldn't explain. Silent orbs moving against the wind, stopping abruptly midair, then zipping away faster than any aircraft could. One clip, shot in 2002 by a trucker named Mason Tate, shows headlights illuminating the empty road. Then, behind him, a second set of lights appears, pure white, floating several feet above the ground, following his truck at an exact distance. The lights matched his every movement. When he pulled over, they stopped. When he turned off his engine, they faded. In the video, you can hear him whisper, whatever that is. It's not from here. The government fence about 20 miles east of Rachel. The road passes a locked chain-link gate marked with faded signs. No trespassing. Use of deadly force authorized. That's the perimeter of Area 51. And while the military denies any connection between the base and the strange lights, people in town tell a different story. A diner waitress at the Little A Inn once told a travel reporter, "We used to think it was planes testing, but planes don't move sideways, and they don't shut off all the radios for miles." In 2013, a researcher named Dr. Alan Pike published a study linking Route 375's strange activity to electromagnetic interference from classified aircraft, but the study was quietly retracted within weeks. When asked later, Pike said, "I was told to drop it." The 2016 incident on August 4, 2016. A long-haul trucker named Earl Donovan was en route to Ely when his rig broke down near mile marker 29. He called dispatch to report mechanical failure. That's the last anyone heard from him. When officers found his truck the next morning, it was idling in neutral. Doors open, headlights flickering. Earl's clothes were folded neatly on the seat. His shoes sat in the dirt 10 feet away. No footprints led from the truck, only a circular pattern in the sand, about 30 feet wide, where the soil had fused into glass. The case remains unsolved. The file is still marked active missing person. The man who drove through the light in 2020, a podcast host named Ryan Clark, recorded an episode on Route 375 after dark. He streamed it live, at least for the first 20 minutes. His last recorded words were, "It's hovering right above me." Oh God, The feed cut out. 3 hours later, he woke up in his parked car on the shoulder, miles away from where he remembered stopping. His engine was still running. His watch had stopped, and carved into the dust on his windshield was a single word, written by a finger that wasn't his: stay. Ryan quit podcasting a month later. He never spoke publicly about that night again. Where the sky touches the ground, locals say the air around Route 375 hums differently, that it carries a faint vibration, like power lines in the sky. They warn travelers never to stop when they see strange lights, never to follow them, because those lights aren't trying to lead you anywhere. They're watching. The government calls it coincidence. The scientists call it misidentification, but the people who drive that road after midnight, they know better. They say the desert remembers. And on Route 375, sometimes it remembers you. In the emptiness of southern Nevada, there is a highway that hums. Not the mechanical growl of engines, not the wind whistling through power lines. This sound feels deeper, like electricity humming beneath the sand, like something ancient trying to remember its own language. Route 375 stretches for 98 miles through the high desert, connecting the towns of Warm Springs and Crystal Springs. On the map, it's a lonely gray thread across a dead landscape. To travelers, it's known by a different name: the Extraterrestrial Highway. Tourists come for the novelty, snapping photos by the green road sign peppered with alien stickers, eating at the little alien diner in Rachel, buying keychains shaped like flying saucers. But the locals, the ranchers and the truckers who know these miles by heart, they don't laugh about the nickname. They say the name is accurate, because on certain nights the sky above Route 375 opens. The silence belt. Every road has a rhythm, the low rumble of tires, the steady thud of the expansion joints. But here, somewhere between mile marker 20 and 45, sound doesn't travel right. You can shout, and your voice feels like it hits a wall of invisible air. Radios cut to static. Compasses spin lazy circles. Truckers call it the silence belt. And if you ever find yourself alone on that stretch at night, you'll feel it, the sensation that the road itself is aware of you. The first major report came from a 1962 police file, long before the term extraterrestrial highway existed. 2 Air Force technicians claimed a blinding white object hovered over their Jeep before shooting upward without sound. The report was stamped, classified, and quietly archived. That should have been the end of it. But over the years, the stories didn't stop. There's a stretch of asphalt in eastern Utah where even the bravest truckers refuse to drive after dark. Locals call it the Devil's Spine, a narrow, twisting section of Highway 191 that cuts through red sandstone cliffs and plunging ravines, a place where headlights seem to vanish into the earth itself. By day, it's beautiful: sculpted arches, towering mesas, and desert light that glows like fire. But at night, when the sun sinks behind the canyons, the road transforms. The air grows heavy, the stars dim, and the silence stretches until it feels like something ancient is listening. Highway 191 runs north-south through Utah from the Arizona border up toward Wyoming, but the 30-mile portion near the Abajo Mountains is different. It's older, cursed, some say alive. No one knows how many lives the road has claimed. Official records list over 200 fatal accidents in the last 40 years. Locals whisper it's more like double that, because sometimes vehicles don't crash. They just disappear. The first story, the burning car. It started with a tragedy that was almost forgotten. In 1983, a newlywed couple, Alan and Ruth Marin, vanished while driving south toward Moab after their wedding in Salt Lake City. Their families assumed they'd taken a detour. But days later, a ranch hand found their car, a blue Pontiac Firebird, still idling on a ridge above Devil's Canyon. The interior was charred black, the paint blistered, metal warped from intense heat. And yet, the surrounding brush showed no signs of fire. Investigators found no footprints, no tire marks, and most disturbingly, no bodies. The heat had melted the dashboard, fused the keys to the ignition, but the driver's seat belts were still buckled, as if the passengers had simply vanished in place. Locals began calling that stretch the Devil's Spine soon after. They said the road took them. A road older than asphalt. Long before the highway was laid, this canyon path was part of the old Spanish Trail, a trade route used by native tribes, explorers, and outlaws. Petroglyphs carved into nearby cliffs show twisting serpents and horned figures, symbols associated with skinwalkers and Chindi, spirits said to haunt the desert at night. One Navajo elder, Thomas Yazzie, once told a journalist, "That place was a scar long before they paved it. The earth remembers what happened there. The road doesn't like noise, and it doesn't like blood." Archaeologists found shallow burial pits near the highway construction zone, unmarked graves filled with burnt bones, the remains carbon-dated centuries apart. Every time crews tried to expand the road, machinery broke down. Workers quit without explanation. When Highway 191 finally opened in the late 70s, a foreman told the Moab Times, "This road doesn't want to exist. It's like we built it over something that was trying to stay buried." The Phantom Truck. One of the most reported legends is the Ghost Semi, a jet-black rig that appears without sound on foggy nights. Drivers describe seeing bright headlights approaching fast from behind. When they pull over to let it pass, the truck barrels through them, not crashing, but passing through like smoke. In 1991, State Trooper Carl Donnelly nearly ran off the road after swerving to avoid those same lights. His patrol dash cam captured 6 seconds of footage before the camera glitched out. The headlights appear impossibly bright and then vanish mid-frame. Carl later told his superiors, "It didn't have a grill or a plate or even an engine sound. Just light and a face reflected in the glass. Not a human one." He quit the force 2 months later. The Hitchhiker in White. Another recurring story comes from countless motorists. A lone woman dressed in white, standing by the shoulder of the road near mile marker 78. Witnesses say she waves them down, silent, her face hidden by long hair. If you stop, she gets in without a word, sits in the back seat and stares out the window. And somewhere near Devil's Canyon Bridge, she vanishes, leaving the car ice cold and the rearview mirror cracked. In 2006, a man named Jacob Henson picked her up during a thunderstorm. He drove her 20 minutes north before realizing his passenger hadn't spoken once. When lightning flashed, he looked into the rearview mirror and saw that her reflection wasn't there. He slammed the brakes, turned around, and the seat was empty. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered. He later told local radio, "The weirdest part? My seatbelt had unbuckled by itself, like someone climbed out." The Skeleton Curve. There's a bend along the highway that locals call Skeleton Curve. If you take it too fast, your headlights catch something pale just beyond the guardrail. Bones, arranged in human shapes, stacked neatly like offerings. Utah DOT crews remove them, but they always return. No one knows who puts them there. In 2018, a drone operator filming the area captured something the internet still debates. Frame by frame, just before the drone loses signal, a humanoid figure appears. Elongated limbs, skin gray and mottled, crawling across the asphalt on all fours. When the drone reconnects seconds later, the road is empty. The clip spread online with the caption, "The Devil's Spine watches back." The disappearance of Highway Patrol Unit 94. In 2014, a patrol unit vanished near the same curve. Officer Brandon Lyle, a 12-year veteran, reported stopping to assist a disabled vehicle emitting smoke. Dispatch lost contact 3 minutes later. When backup arrived, they found Brandon's cruiser idling, radio still transmitting faint static. The driver's side door was open and his flashlight lay in the middle of the road, still on. But there was no other car. No tracks, no debris, no trace of heat. And his dash cam? It recorded 11 seconds of footage before freezing. The last frame shows Brandon's headlights illuminating a dark, man-shaped figure standing in the lane, eyes glowing a dull red. His body was never recovered. The road's Pulse locals claim that if you park your car on the spine at midnight, engine off, and place your hand on the asphalt, you can feel it breathe. The ground vibrates faintly, like a slow, deep heartbeat. Truckers say their CB radios sometimes pick up whispering voices near the canyon. Not interference, not static, actual voices. Some whisper their names, others whisper coordinates, and some whisper things that haven't happened yet. A geologist once measured magnetic anomalies in that area and found levels so erratic they resembled living electrical interference. He laughed about it at first, until all the photos on his camera deleted themselves overnight. The red fog. Every few years, during the coldest nights of October, travelers report a blood-colored fog rolling down the canyon, dense enough to turn headlights crimson. When it clears, the air smells like iron and burnt rubber. In 2019, a dash cam captured this phenomenon for the first time. A wall of red mist swallows the car, visibility drops to zero, and a woman's voice whispers, "Turn back." Then a shadow crosses the headlights, tall, moving sideways, dragging something metallic behind it. The driver survived but never spoke publicly again. Only said one thing to police: whatever's out there, it knows when you're watching. When you drive the devil's spine. Even now, Utah's Highway 191 remains a lifeline for truckers, tourists, and locals. But those who know the desert's temperament treat that stretch like sacred ground. You don't honk, you don't stop for strangers, and you don't talk about what you see because it listens. They say every few miles you can still see black scorch marks in the asphalt, like fingerprints pressed into the earth. And sometimes, when your headlights hit just the right angle, you'll see a reflection in your windshield that isn't yours, staring back, waiting for you to blink. Because on the devil's spine, you don't just travel the road, you feed it. If you drive Highway 191 at night, you'll notice how quickly the world seems to disappear. The desert stretches endlessly, painted in shades of rust and shadow. The only sound is the hum of your tires on asphalt, until it isn't. Then the silence begins to press on you, heavy and alive. Truckers say that's when you know you've entered the spine, a place the maps can't quite define, and the GPS glitches just enough to make you doubt your sense of direction. The signs begin to warp under your headlights. Distances don't match the odometer, and the temperature inside your cab drops even though the desert outside is boiling. That's how the road welcomes you, by making you think you're the only one left alive for 100 miles. The mechanic's last call-on of the most haunting testimonies came from a Moab mechanic named Dean Porter, recorded in 1999. Dean worked for a roadside assistance company and was dispatched one night to help a stranded family on 191. They said their van just shut down. He told the sheriff's deputy later. No warning, no sputter, like someone pulled the plug. When Dean reached the location, there was no van, just an empty stretch of road, except for faint skid marks that led off the shoulder toward the canyon. He followed them on foot. About 20 yards down, the track stopped abruptly. No broken brush, no debris, no sign of a crash. And yet, hanging in the air, he swore he could smell gasoline and hear a child crying. Dean reported the incident, then went home. 2 days later, he quit his job and moved to Idaho. When police reviewed his dash cam, the last 20 seconds showed something impossible. A faint shimmer, like heat distortion, and a child's handprint pressed against the lens from the inside. The legend of the Red Woman. There's another story that refuses to die, one that began with the Navajo miners who worked the area in the 1940s. They spoke of a spirit known as Dine, Nazi Ilidasdan, the Red Woman. There's a road in eastern Kansas that doesn't appear on most modern maps. Locals call it Route 103, though the state decommissioned it decades ago. It winds through flat farmland and dead wheat fields before ending at a place called Willow's Rest, a ghost town forgotten by time. To outsiders, it's nothing but an abandoned settlement swallowed by prairie grass. But to the people of Clay County, Route 103 is cursed, because when the wind turns warm at night and the cicadas stop singing, they say you can still hear the voices. Children crying, a church bell ringing, and something whispering your name from beneath the wheat. A town that died twice. Willow's Rest was founded in 1879, a small farming village with less than 200 residents. It grew around a single church, a general store, and a one-room schoolhouse. Life was quiet, predictable, until the drought of 1912. Crops withered, livestock starved. By winter, half the town had left, the other half stayed. And then came the fever. It started with a few children, high fevers, hallucinations, violent tremors. The town's doctor believed it was typhoid, but whatever it was, it spread fast. By spring, 70 people were dead. The The survivors buried them all in a shallow mass grave beside the churchyard, beneath a cluster of old willow trees. That's how the town got its name. Willow's Rest, where the willows wept and the dead refused to stay still. The road that vanished. In 1963, the state built Route 103, a short highway connecting Willow's Rest to nearby Junction City. But construction workers soon began reporting strange incidents. Equipment broke down without explanation. Survey lines shifted overnight, and workers swore they saw figures standing among the willows, watching them from the tree line. One worker, Henry Lawton, filed a written complaint with the Department of Transportation. He wrote, "Every night we hear a woman singing near the creek. It sounds like a lullaby, but when you get close, it's not words. It's whispering, and the closer you get, the colder it gets." 2 days after submitting the complaint, Henry disappeared. His truck was found idling by the bridge, headlights on, radio hissing static. The police marked it as a missing persons case, but the crew stopped work immediately after. The highway opened with no ribbon cutting, no ceremony. And over time, the road itself began to crumble, reclaimed by grass and roots, as if the earth wanted it gone. The lullaby. In the late 1970s, a series of car accidents began to occur along Route 103, always at night, always near mile marker 12, just before the entrance to Willow's Rest. Survivors described hearing the same thing before they crashed. A woman's voice, soft and distant, singing a lullaby through their car radio. It played even when the radio was off. One driver, Lisa Morton, recalled, "I thought it was a song at first. Then I realized it was saying my name. When police searched her wrecked vehicle, they found something carved into the inside of her windshield. Stay with us." The pastor's diary. In 1981, a local historian discovered the preserved diary of Reverend Elias Crane, the last pastor of Willow's Rest Church. The final entry, dated November 3, 1913, reads, "The fever has taken the children first, then the mothers. I hear their cries through the floorboards at night. I burned their bodies to stop the sickness, but their voices remain. They come to the windows when the wind blows east. They ask for their names to be spoken. I fear the Lord has turned his face from this place." Beneath the final page, scrawled in dried ink, one more line appears, written by a shaking hand. "Do not ring the bell after sundown." The bell he mentioned still hangs in the church tower. Locals say it rings by itself, though the rope was cut long ago. The night watcher's footage. In 1999, an amateur ghost hunter named Tyler Grant drove to Willow's Rest with a handheld camera, hoping to document paranormal activity for his college film project. His car was found 3 days later, parked beside the church. The camera was still recording. The footage begins with Tyler narrating, flashlight in hand, describing the empty streets and decaying houses. Around midnight, he stops outside the church, whispering, "The wind just stopped. Everything's quiet, not even bugs." Then, a faint melody. It's soft at first, a woman humming somewhere near the trees. Tyler whispers, "Do you hear that?" Though no one is with him, he turns the camera toward the sound. And for 3 seconds, something moves between the willows. A shadow shaped like a woman, tall and swaying as though suspended in water. When she turns, the camera shakes violently and the feed cuts to black. The last frame before the tape ends shows the church door half open, and in the dark doorway, 2 small figures, children holding hands. Tyler's body was never found. The town that reappears. Every few years, travelers report seeing lights along Route 103, lanterns flickering in the distance, leading into the wheat fields. Those who follow them claim to find a town that shouldn't exist. One trucker in 2008 described it perfectly. "I saw buildings, lights in the windows, heard laughter, like a county fair from another time. But when I blinked, it was gone. Just corn and dirt. And I swear I still heard that singing." Police later found his rig parked in the middle of the road, hazard lights flashing. On his dash, scratched into the dust with a fingertip, were 3 words, "She's still waiting." The investigation. In 2012, a paranormal research team from Topeka University attempted to map the electromagnetic fields around Willow's Rest. Their readings spiked near the old churchyard, strong enough to interfere with their instruments. But one researcher, Dana Wells, noticed something stranger. The EMF spikes pulsed in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. She followed the readings to the willow grove. Beneath the largest tree, she found fragments of porcelain, old hand-painted toys, and a rusted bell engraved with the year 1913. When she touched it, her recorder picked up a faint voice. "Do not wake the children." Dana quit the project immediately after. 2 weeks later, her house in Topeka burned to the ground. Investigators ruled it accidental, but neighbors swore they heard singing coming from inside before the fire started. The woman in the wheat. The most recent sighting came in August 2021, when a drone hobbyist flying near Route 103 captured footage of the overgrown highway. In the background, for only a moment, a pale figure can be seen walking through the wheat. Long white dress, dark hair covering her face. As the drone zoomed closer, she stopped, turned toward the camera, and smiled. The footage went viral online, earning millions of views. But the uploader deleted his channel within days, saying in one final post, "I see her now outside my window. She hums the same song every night." What remains today? Route 103 is nothing but a cracked service road leading to a cluster of forgotten graves. But locals still warn travelers to never drive past the Willow Creek Bridge after midnight. Because that's when the lullaby starts again. Through the wind, through your radio, even through the vibration of your steering wheel. They say if you listen long enough, you'll hear the words hidden inside the song. They aren't calling for help, they're calling for company. And if you stop, if you dare to follow that voice beneath the willows, you'll find the ground soft and hollow beneath your feet, like something waiting to breathe again. Because the dead of Willow's Rest don't haunt the road, they live in it. And every passing traveler adds another verse to their song. They say the song changes every decade. Old-timers in Clay County remember when it was just humming, a faint wordless melody carried through the wheat. But lately the song has grown clearer. Some swear they can hear lyrics now. A woman's voice singing a lullaby about the harvest, about sleep, about coming home. Truckers who drive the back routes avoid that stretch of Kansas entirely. Even GPS apps reroute themselves, as though the satellites don't recognize Route 103 anymore. But every so often, someone ignores the warnings. And when they do, the road remembers them. The Truck Driver's Testimony, 2023. The most recent report came from Calvin Mendez, a freight driver hauling grain from Wichita to Kansas City. At 2:13 a.m. on August 14th, his dash cam captured the last 15 minutes of his route before he vanished for nearly 2 days. When state troopers found him wandering the fields off Route 103, he was barefoot, dehydrated, and repeating the same words over and over. They're still playing. When questioned later at the hospital, Calvin described what happened in chilling detail. "It started with the lights," he said. "Looked like lanterns just off the road. Thought it was farmhands or kids screwing around. Then my radio turned on by itself. Static, real faint at first, but under it I heard humming. Same tone, over and over, like someone trying to remember a song. My GPS glitched, showed me driving through a lake that isn't there. Then the wheat started moving. Not from the wind, like something crawling underneath." Calvin said a small figure stepped into the road about 50 yards ahead, a girl in a white dress, her feet bare and caked with mud. She was holding a doll missing its head. "I slammed the brakes," he said, shaking. She didn't flinch, just stood there smiling. Then my lights flickered, and when they came back on, she was gone. But the doll was lying on the hood of my truck. When police recovered the vehicle, they did find an antique porcelain doll, cracked, face burned black, its back stamped 1913. Calvin's dashcam footage cuts out right